industry insight session, and the topic is quite interesting. That is the narrative advantage, unleashing the power of storytelling in digital marketing. We already have our key speakers joining in, and they're on the same table, all right? So we have our first speaker, Hafiz Mohammed Waqas. He's a founder and business analyst, MechPlan Business Solution Agency. Can we have a big round of applause for him and have him on the stage, please? We have our second speaker, Felita Figueredo. She's a Senior Director, Digital and Insights, EMEA from FTI Consulting. She just gave her introduction, so can we have a big round of applause for her and have her on the stage, please? We have our third speaker, Tufail Merchant, Business Director and Co-founder with Howl Digital. They're also our digital and growth marketing partner with DIGITALCONFEX and with Ford team at CONFEX. So can we have a big round of applause for Tufail? Due to some reason, our board is unable to join us today, unforeseen circumstances with him. And we already have our moderator here, Malika Kennedy. She's a Chief Business Development Officer from Yango Ads, EMEA. So can we have a big round of applause for her and have her on the stage? So over to you, Malika.
Hi everyone, I hope you can hear me very well. So today we're going to be unpacking a very interesting topic that become even more relevant in the time of AI, data, the depreciation of cookies. So we want to make sure of how do we address our brands and clients so that our stories stick to them and our stories make impact. So we have a great panelist, Ari, with us here today, and I would like to start with an opening question. So what is storytelling and in the digital era today? How do you define it? What would be the most appropriate definition of it for you guys?
Hello, hi. No, that's a great question. That's a great question, Malika. I think to really define storytelling or building out narrative, you got to break down, every brand into two aspects, and this is, I think, a 101 basics. Every brand has a functional benefit. Every brand has an emotional benefit. As competition keeps growing, right, the functional benefit is going to be the same for most of the brands, most of the product categories, right? The only thing that's going to remain is going to be the emotional benefit, and that's where you build out your entire narrative. That's where you build out, the whole story for the brand. And I think in today's times, that aspect is going to be so important, right? Because you've got, so many brands operating in the same space, and it's going to get even more harder to really be able to communicate that emotional benefit. And the only way you can do that is to building very strong narratives and through a lot of storytelling. So I'm just going to pass on to the others, but that's, yeah.
Hi. If I talk about storytelling, the word is totally changed. In the past, people used to say that this is the price you have to purchase it. But no, the word is not going to say that. They come up with the idea, they feel you, it's necessary, or it's your dream. When you see with this lens, things are totally different, and you are eagerly to go for that stuff.
Storytelling is not a really new concept. I mean, if we think about us as people, as cultures, stories have been passed down for generations. But what is actually changing now is how we communicate. We no longer have the opportunity, a lot of that face-to-face and emotional connections like we used to. We are now digital, we're connected. And the biggest challenge in this connected world is getting people's attention. That is the most important, and it's I guess how we call it now is called the attention economy. And if you can capture someone's attention long enough to actually convey your message, that's the key in successful marketing. So in essence, and that is why storytelling is just so important now, because that's the change when you talk about how it has evolved, is how do we actually maintain emotional connections with people through multiple mediums at the same time when everyone is trying to do the same thing. So trying to actually get your message across in 30 seconds or less, build a connection, sell emotion, sell your brand. That's how storytelling, why it is important and why we need to look at it from a digital lens today.
Thank you. I love the answers. And I wanted to delve more into this. So in the attention span of the first kind of impression in digital within the first 3 seconds, how do you get a person be involved in that brand? What is your hook? How do you appeal to that emotional benefit? What are the different technologies and techniques you would use to get that first connection?
So I'll answer this example of a question, right? We did some work with Under Armour back in India. Now we think of Under Armour as a brand. It's so different from the likes of a Nike or an Adidas. Now what does Under Armour really stand for? When you think about it, right? You have The Rock, that's Dwayne Johnson, that's its brand ambassador. So unlike a Nike and an Adidas, right? Under Armour, and this is what we boiled down to, it stands for 3 main words. One is transformation, endurance, and performance. When you think of these 3 keywords, right, you can automatically relate to Under Armour as a brand. And now, when you think about these 3 keywords, what we did was we decided to really capture these 3 keywords. So anything that was related to a performance, running shoes, endurance training, everything that was related to these keywords, we literally just took over all those keywords from a Google POV. So when in terms of search, anybody searching for those 3 keywords, they would find Under Armour. That's number 1. Now from an outbound POV, right, when we were looking at a lot of ads on Meta and other programmatic platforms where you're looking at only 3 seconds, the only thing that we kept hammering was these 3 keywords, right? Performance shoes, and everything that was built out from a storytelling perspective was around these 3 aspects. So when you're very focused in terms of what your core value proposition is and how you want to put that narrative out there, that's when the connection happens between the audience and the brand.
I back your words. When the spam is very low, like 3 seconds, if we are going to plan a story, we have to always come up with a hook. So in 3 seconds, if you are capable, or if you do it with a hook, people is going to with you. Like 30 second ads in 3 seconds is a time span. If there's a hook, they will stop and go for the whole ad. Otherwise, people just skip ads, Facebook, Instagram, what, you just need to go another ad.
What I really like about what my panelists are saying is that how important having good research and good data is as a starting point before we actually get into storytelling. When we look at our audiences, it's not about seeing audiences as a mass market. We all know we're very different. We're very different in what we're interested in, our behaviors, how we interact, how we speak to people, and how we communicate. And having these insights as to what actually motivates us, what triggers us, what inspires us, gives us a starting point when how to communicate these stories. So for example, like building on Under Armour, like there are some excellent keywords around here. We know that based on what we can see through search and how people are responding to it. How can we take that keyword and actually build content around it? So that means how are people actually being motivated? Who are they being motivated with? Who is their inspiration points? So once we get a foundation and understanding around that, it builds us an idea of our audiences and in terms of the persona of these audiences. And that gives us an excellent starting point in building the story and how do we want to communicate in terms of what are our brand values, what are our audience values, where do they actually meet, and then communicating that out to the people.
Thank you very much. It actually brings me to the next question. So when it comes to the role of data in storytelling, can you please tell me, of course you covered what you've done in terms of the beginning, the research, the outlines, the audiences, but how do you connect that journey? How do you make sure that your narrative is unified through different mediums? Because now you interact with people on search, you interact with people on social, in digital, and offline, on TV, connected TV, etc. So how do you use data to make sure that you have unified experience all throughout?
That's an interesting question, and a very relevant one, because when you're looking at the entire consumer purchase journey, right, you're looking at top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel optimization, right? And even though your narrative is unified, you've got to obviously use different pegs of communication across the customer purchase journey to be able to influence the audience to move to the next step, right? And the only way you can do that is to be able to study data, right? With data, you're able to understand, firstly, different audience personas, and you're able to sort of group them there. You're able to tell whether a certain kind of communication is working for each of these audience personas or not, right? So data becomes the bedrock of how you're going to communicate, each of these stories to your audiences. And then obviously you keep filtering out all of that bit. Even in your entire remarketing exercises, you're constantly evolving and iterating your message, across, the entire journey. And that's why data plays a very, very important role.
When we are going to make any ad or any campaign, data is the first part. If we understand the data, if we find out what kind of audience we have, what kind of interest they have, and what they are thinking and what they perceive from our ads or our own perspective, then we would able to a good ad. We would able to make any ad or any story that will helpful or they can relate with that.
Hello? Okay. So I would say that, if we look at our own behaviors and we look at us, how many devices are we constantly surrounded with? I bet we all have TV, phones, iPads, laptops, which we're constantly looking at. And having someone to focus on one device at a time is such a challenge. And then besides the devices, we have the multiple channels on those devices as well. And this is when the data comes and plays such an important role, because we also have to look at behavior, at consumption behavior. And the advantage of digital and how in our very, very connected world is that it can be extremely seamless. We can advertise on multiple channels simultaneously. We have instant retargeting, and we can custom each of these channels with a different message. So when we talk about the funnel unfortunately is not as straightforward as it used to be. It's quite back and forth across different channels, different devices, all at the same time. So it's important that we have a very connected message, simultaneously advertising, simultaneously promoting across organic, native, and paid with the same consistent messages, just to ensure that we're actually reaching our audiences. And this is where data and understanding of people's behavior online, what are their patterns, what are their preferences, and how they consume content plays such an important role in shaping what this journey actually looks like.
Thank you. And from that perspective, how do you use storytelling contextually to the placement of the interaction with the user? So if, as you said, user in search, it's quite straightforward. There is a keyword, there is an intent. So you know how to connect with that person. But when you're reaching out to someone on social, in their leisure time, how do you grab their attention? When you are interacting with someone on the work laptop, when a person is doing research, how do you contextually use storytelling to grab that attention? And how do you change the approach depending on the different placement?
Okay, I'm going to answer that with an example, right? And this is a client that we work with. It's a brand called Schindler Elevators. I think all of you guys might have come across Schindler. They're everywhere, right? And when you think of Schindler as a brand, you think of steel elevators. You think of it's a manufacturing company. It's a very hard and cold industry. And I think when we started working with them, the whole idea of working with them was obviously when we were looking at performance and getting them leads and being able to sell elevators online, which we did. The other aspect was, how do you sort of humanize a brand? How does Schindler, not just come across as a steel cold company. And then we took a step back and we thought about what does Schindler really enable its audiences to do. And when you think about it, they are responsible for the mobility of more than 1 billion people in urban spaces, right? And when you think about that, that's fantastic, that's big, that's huge, right? So when I'm thinking about, my pitch would be is that Schindler is the largest urban mobility company in the world, right? You take that and you move a couple of steps forward and you realize what are different things that happen on a Schindler elevator or an escalator. There are people moving up and down. There are emotions, right? You think of these scenarios, maybe a boss with an intern in an elevator having a conversation, or maybe just, maybe a boy and a girl, flirting with each other. And then suddenly you've got these beautiful stories coming out, right? From, experiences on the escalator, experiences on the elevator. And now you have this gigantic opportunity of really being able to humanize a brand which is only cold and steel. And that's essentially what we're trying to do constantly with Schindler. So when you're seeing a Schindler piece of content or you're seeing an ad, it's so warm and so much more nicer, and it sort of allows you to connect. And that top of the mind recall keeps building, because every time you're moving up and down in your building in a Schindler elevator, and you're thinking about it, and it makes you smile, right? And that's how you're sort of using storytelling to be able to reach out to each of these audiences and humanize your brands.
While a brand come to the market, it's not just a thing he's going to sell. Like if I take an example of the Coke, Coke is a soda brand, everyone know. Coke and Pepsi are, everyone know about that. But when you see that Coke in the music industry, why? No reason, but to link with the audience. Like if Coke present any singer, he just boosts his career. So in short, if I talk about storytelling just we have to put the customer in the position where he can see himself, where she can see herself. So once they relate it, they always go with that.
So I do a lot of B2B marketing, and a question I often get asked is if you're talking to other companies, why do I have to care about channels such as Instagram or more social oriented ones? And my answer to this always comes down to, but you're still talking to people. And people have behaviors. You go on a certain platform for a certain reason. You're on LinkedIn for networking, connectivity, education, etc. You go on Instagram to be visually inspired, perhaps, or to zone out, or to chill or relax. But in the end of the day, the people you're talking to use platforms for different reasons. And keeping that in mind is really important when you're tailoring content, because you have to look at the characteristics of the platform, but also in, I guess, the mind of what that person and how that person is using the platform and what is the reason behind it. So how can I very subtly actually introduce my ad, introduce my brand, introduce my product without disrupting the experience for them, unless that is the intention. So being a lot more mindful about the way the content you create, the story you're trying, and the placement will help dictate what that content would look like. How should the tone of voice be? How should the visuals be? Do I need to rely more on video or make it more casual, conversational? Do I have to take a more formal-based approach if I'm going on LinkedIn or other professional channels? So having a more 360 view about not only audiences, channels, how they're being utilized, and again, the insights helps create almost a more natural way of integrating your content onto platforms.
Thank you. That's an excellent answer, and understanding the intent of the person being the platform is it. Because once you know in which mood they are, which context, you know how to speak to them. So now I want to go into more, I would say, business continuity question and say, how do you use storytelling to build lifetime value of a customer, to increase loyalty, to encourage repeat use or purchases, and keep bringing back that customer to your brand?
Okay, so I'll give you another example, right? This is a brand called HRX. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the superstar back in India called Hrithik Roshan, If you are, that's great. If you're not, then check him out. So he's launched a brand called HRX, and the idea was to sort of really compete with the likes of a Nike, Adidas, Puma, and they said, the vision was, why can't I build an Indian version of what Nike is? We've been working with them for 7 years now, right? So that question is very relevant because the idea is to really keep getting the customer back, into the conversation. I think, again, it goes back to really what your core value prop is, and how you built out a narrative. And then within that narrative, how do you build out different aspects of communication and messaging depending on the maturity of the brand? So initially, when we started off in 2018 and this brand was barely 2 years old, the conversation and the communication that we took was very different. It was about, hey, you know what, try us out, right? We're the new age brand. We're going to be doing really cool stuff. Hrithik Roshan as a superstar was far more prevalent in conversations, but now 6 to 7 years later, he isn't. The brand has obviously matured. It moved from, a $25 million revenue brand to now almost a $200 million revenue brand, right? So in those 7 years, they've grown leaps and bounds. So now the conversation is about, where we've built communities and we've built multiple touch points where the consumer can interact with the brand. And within each of these communities and within each of these touch points and channels, the conversation has become very different. So initially, you had a unified communication, but now you have so many different fragments of communication. So I'm talking to a calisthenics community, right? The kind of conversation I'm having with them is different. If I'm talking to a running club, that's different. And we're talking about different geographies, we're talking about different kinds of people, right? So essentially where my marketing communication was unified initially, right? Today, it's segmented, again, basis multiple customers. And that's how we're being able to get each of these users back into the conversation. Because when you're looking at fitness, it's such a broad conversation, it's such a broad topic that there's no one way of being able to talk to all of these fitness enthusiasts. And that's essentially what we've been doing with HRX. I hope that answered the question, yeah?
Okay, when we talk about customer loyalty or the customer journey, it's not a one time, it always go, and as our brand is grow, our client is also going to up and up. So we always relate our client. At last day we just have lunch and we are sitting with some of the people and talking about Salman Khan. Maybe many of you know about that. If we talk about Salman Khan and in the house, mother likes it, kids likes it, everyone is going to like it. The reason behind that, the way he branding himself. So this is one of the way you have to, once you come up with the campaign, you have to target each and everyone with different way as they want you to see.
What I like about loyalty is that it's such an interesting concept. But what we forget, I think what we don't realize is that loyalty is also a spectrum. People can be loyal, but loyal for different reasons and different incentives. You can have the people who are hardcore brand loyal, right? These are your lining up in front of the store for the first iPhone drop, right? Hardcore loyalists, you don't have to actually do much with them because they are there and advocates of your brand. But at the same time, you have the other extreme. You have people who will wait for the new iPhone to come out, but that means the next the previous one is a little bit cheaper. So they will go and buy that one. But that doesn't mean they're not less loyal. They're still buying Apple, they're still sticking to the same brand and product. It's just that the intent is very different. So loyalty as that is a spectrum and is a scale. It's also understanding people's incentives and intent and why they want to buy your products. So is it because of the love of the brand, love of the person behind the brand, or it could be sometimes they're just more price sensitive. So in that case, understanding loyalty and understanding the intent with why people buy your brands is also so key in tailoring messages to them. So for example, for the hardcore loyalists, all you need to say is that, hey, there's a new product drop at this, and you know there's going to be sales. But for the others, it's having a continued messaging, keeping your brand top of mind, keeping price points top of mind, keeping offers, incentives. So it comes back down to what my co-panelists were saying in terms of segmentation and understanding intent and then tailoring your message based on what people are actually looking for.
Thank you. And in the context of brand being relevant to different audiences and expansion of different brands in different geographies, how do you go about crafting your stories for local markets? Because at the same time, the brand wants to keep the same identity, whatever it would be, yet still be relevant to the culture context, to the traditional context of a new geography. So if we're talking about go global, be local, what's your approach for storytelling?
Okay, so I come from a country where there are more than 28 states, and each of them have their own culture. So literally going from one state to another, it seems like you're going from one country to another because you don't understand the language, right? How do you stay relevant? How do you take what you've been able to craft and take it to a different geography and different individuals? I think the answer lies in and the underlying human emotion over here, right? And to really understand what's motivating them and what the intent is towards the brand, and obviously crafting a message in relation to that. For example, if I were to look again at the in the south of India, they have their own superstars, right? It's not like this individual, Hrithik Roshan, is very big over there. But here, I would craft my conversation, right, devoid of a Hrithik Roshan, because again, it's been able to establish a level now where I don't need the superstar to be able to sell the product. So my conversation is going to be more about fitness and everything about fitness, and sort of put that forward, right? And then wherever Hrithik's appeal works, that's when we obviously use more of it, right? So really it depends on audiences in different areas, what's actually motivating them, what's their intent, what are the most likely to buy in terms of a story, and then you craft that story for each of these audiences.
Here is data come. If we are going to from one region to another region, we have first we have to go to the culture. We have to understand the culture and what people think. Like as my brother told us, if they move from one city to another city, the same way from one country to another country. So language change, people change, their point of view change. So sometimes it happen. The word using one country, it's a different meaning to other country. So when we talk about, we have to go that level, we have to come up with a deep study, deep research, then we will be able to come up with the story, or that story that can relate with them. As I just put an example of the Coke before, when Coke launched his music, it's a different for Pakistan, it's a different for India, and in India it's a different for different cultures. So this is one of the examples. Thank you.
What I would actually like to talk about is, while there are differences in cultures, we should also look at the similarity between them. And I think this is where digital plays such an important role now, because I read this the other day about how culture is a remix, which basically means that everyone is inspired now from seeing what everyone else is doing. And when it comes to content, and yes, it is so important to take into context, cultural differences, it is also important to see how the message is actually spreading across cultures and people are interpreting it in their own ways. So I like to use the word localization a lot when it comes to how can we adapt. And adapt, it doesn't always require me extensive changes. It means looking at how people are interpreting it. Digital trends are going viral, they are popular across different regions. We're seeing TikTok dances done in rural villages in some countries all the way to cities, and that's common language of digital. So when we talk about culture, we're also seeing that there are a lot of similarities. And when we talk about then how can we actually use storytelling in this context is simplification. How can we make something so simple that it's easy for people to take it, internalize it, and then express it using their own ways, right? So we have songs, we have dances, we have brand taglines, which we've seen people adapt into their own cultures, in their own languages. And this is the way you can actually see the similarity. And this is what I love about digital, that everything is just so connected that it's easy to actually amplify messages in a way that's easy to understand.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask you guys, what inspires you? What are the examples of very successful storytelling where the narrative is so clear from any of the brand, whether it's within your career or inspiration from elsewhere, that you can truly relate to? Could you please share that?
Okay, I'm not going to try to be cliche and give the big brand names. Okay, so there's this brand called The Whole Truth, right? The Whole Truth, and they've launched. It was an ex-Unilever guy. They launched this brand in 2015, and his idea was that whatever I'm going to create, it's going to be 100% natural, right? And that's why the whole idea of the whole truth. What I'm going to tell you is the whole truth. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm also going to tell you that if I'm going to create something which is absolutely natural, it may not taste the best, right? But it's going to be great, right? And they've been doing it for the past now, 7 odd years and 8 odd years. They've been, I think it's now a $100 million brand. And they make a lot of granola, they make protein bars and the likes of that. And I really love the way they've really been able to put themselves out there. The founder himself, I forgot his name, but the way he's put himself out there and really spoken about the brand, built that brand on that core value is amazing. It's very easy to slip up and say, hey, you know what, I need to go mass, I need to be able to bring in commercialization. So maybe, I'll try to get in a little bit of preservatives for it to last longer. I'll probably be able to add a little bit of sugar, whatever it is, to be able to make it taste better. But no, man, these guys have been at it. They've junked products when they've realized that, it's not living up to their core value. And I think that brand is fantastic. And, everybody in the room, do check out The Whole Truth.
Okay, if I talk about the inspiration, I just saw one of the ad, Just Do It, Nike. Most of you know about that. In that ad, I just go through the interview from YouTube, and I found that the people who was doing that ad, he visited from one country to another country and another country the same way. He's not saying any word, he's just walking, he's just running. And once the ad is run very well, all things are going very perfect, the interview has come up, and he told that he did not wear even the shoes of the Nike or any product, but still that ad can work. The reason behind that, the emotions he put that, and the people, they can relate with them. This is one of the inspiration. Thank you.
I love this question because I love brands. I'm a branding person at heart, and what I really like to see about brands is when they actually live up to their values. It's a new thing. You'll see like people talk a lot about purpose marketing and understanding what your purpose is, but in essence, it's not really new. It's just trying to say that as a brand, what are your brand values, and are you actually communicating that authentically and living it across not just all your touch points, but in your own personal culture, in your internal culture, and your employees. So it's really having that 360 view. And one of the brands which actually stood out for me, really, it's Virgin. And I really like Virgin because it's one of the few brands I've seen which has been extremely authentic in everything it does. You won't find a lot of brand success stories who'll say, oh, we're in telecom and in mobility and now space and now mega stores and entertainment and events and so on and so forth. Not many brands can actually pull that off successfully. But then if you look at Richard Branson, you see how he actually communicates the values, you see how he lives it. It comes across in all their touch points, and in everything you do, there is that little bit of why not, a little bit of craziness, a little bit of adventure. So when you're going up with, or you're associating with Virgin, you'll see that common brand touch points being authentically communicated. And that's why I actually really like them.
Thank you. I really appreciate the answers, and I also want to ask you questions that probably come a little bit of a surprise. What are the examples of bad storytelling? Because we all like to talk about good, but what are the real flops that actually, when you saw this, is like, oh no, I wish I have not seen it. So I would love to hear your answers about this.
You want to go first? For me, like, give me a thought. Bad storytelling. Nothing's coming to my mind right now.
Malika, do you want to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, there was a campaign, I think like, but Coke, somewhere in Africa, and they wanted to go about the tagline, be positive, because they wanted to be optimistic, but because in Africa there are a lot of issues with different diseases, that actually was a complete flop because the social economic context of the place where they advertised was completely out of the question. So it was a complete backfire. So I think it is very important to understand, as the guys said many times, who you're speaking to and what is the context. Especially like when you're coming to a new market that's very different from the market where you are highly present at.
Okay. I can't give a specific example, but I hate it when brands on an International Women's Day, decide to create campaigns because they have to and really talk about, how they celebrate women and the likes of that. I find that very cringe, and a lot of brands just get it wrong so badly, it's not even funny. And I think no one's really thinking about it. It's just because, there's something that needs to be done over there, and that's when they do it. But I think, why can't you really think about it year round? Why can't you really, think about how you want to sort of talk about, women in leadership roles, women in STEM, and the likes of that, and then eventually build it up to, a nice crescendo on that and really sort of put it out there. Because when you're doing something for the heck of it, it just looks bad. You can just see through it, right? And a lot of brands just get it really wrong. So that's where storytelling really goes for a toss.
Okay, when we talk about bad storytelling, there's one of the campaign came in my mind. That's the Pepsi campaign at the Philippines. Maybe many of you know about that. They just put a campaign with the price, a big price, and they said that if you find that quote in your bottle, and you will win the prize. But at the end of the day, they just print 8,000 something numbers, and there are lots of people who come up from their houses, and they just at the end of the story, they just leave to that country. So this is the bad branding stuff. Once you are going to plan something, or you are going to offer some anything, any reward, you have to calculate and you have to be very careful.
Oh, last but not least. Okay. Can you say that there is no such thing as bad PR? I want to say, is there such a thing as bad storytelling? I mean, if you think about it, why are we storytelling? We want people to remember. We want people to remember the brand. We want, of course, in very positive associations. And there are times when there've been, coming back, I think there was the Pepsi ad, which went viral for all the wrong reasons. The one with Kylie Jenner, and I think it was a bit of the police, and which I get, like, okay, it's a bit of a sensitive situation, but people are still kind of talking about it, right? Like, has Pepsi sales actually really dropped? Not quite, but in the sense that it is being there, it is top of mind. But another one that comes in a more positive light is, does anyone remember the gorilla ad with Cadbury's? Like, it's the man in a gorilla costume and he's playing drums, and when that ad went out, people were just like, what? I don't get it. I don't get what has this got to do with Cadbury, and there's a Phil Collins song playing in the background. But it created talkability, right? And that's one of the important things which we talk when we think about storytelling, is that we want it to be memorable. We want people to discuss it. We want people to actually say, wait, did you see that? What was that about? Do you agree? Do you not agree? And I think that's also a big part of storytelling, is that it could not be right. And maybe it doesn't speak to everyone in the way you do, but that doesn't always mean it's wrong.
Thank you. And to add to that, I want to get your opinions in terms of storytelling in the moment marketing, right? We live in the time of social, where hard question can be asked from anyone at any point. And how do you use that to your advantage to still get your story across in the right way and to the right audiences in the moment?
Okay. How much time do we have?
I think we have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. Cool. In the moment, I'll just take a minute, think about it. Do you guys want to go for this?
Okay, I'll go with this
Yeah.
one. What I really like about this question is we like to call these moments as moments of truth, because it's at that point where you actually see what a brand is made of. And in many cases, especially in business comms, they'll be like, look, we don't want community management. We don't really want to respond to people because, we don't really have anything to say as such. And I'm like, but why are you doing this then? It comes back to understanding the purpose. If your community are trying to engage with you, be it a positive or a negative, there is still feedback to be taken from that. And that feedback is really good because your customer is saying, hear me out. I have something to tell you. And it may not be something that you want to hear, which unfortunately in many cases it does happen. I think the biggest challenge as marketers is that we think that we know our brands best because we've been working with it for so long. And in a survey which was done, it was found that 90% of marketers think that the content they are creating resonates really well with their audiences. And then when the same survey was done with the audiences, they said that maybe 40 to 50% of the content they see actually works. So you're saying there's almost a 40% gap between what you're saying and what your audiences are talking and what they see. So in that gap, if people are reaching out to you and saying, listen, I'm not happy with this, I don't agree with this, it's not culturally sensitive, or it's not right in terms of the product, then it's a matter of actually how do you internalize it and what do you do with that information. So in terms of, I would say, moments of truth or community management, etc., like be prepared. It's always a good this to have. And if not, there's nothing wrong in saying you don't know the answer, because you are still a company which is run by people, and having that human element and that human interaction is just so important in terms of authentic connection.
I'll just quickly add to that, right? When it comes to dealing with a moment of truth, I think brands need to be far much more conversational than they have been before, and we've seen that, right? Amazon Prime Music is one of our clients, right? And the kind of conversations that we're having with different communities, with different music labels, with artists, right? It just creates this beautiful banter and beautiful chatter. It's not always going to work. You're going to have people giving you shit, and because obviously that's social media. But I think when you're conversational, it humanizes your approach as a brand. And when it humanizes your approach as a brand, the audiences feel that they're talking to a human being and not to a brand. And it's far much more easier to converse, right? And that allows, again, a bit of compelling storytelling also to take place at that point in time. So it has to be conversational, right, moving forward.
When we talk about movement market, as I just asked the question, one thing is in my mind. Recently, when iPhone 16 is launched, Samsung just put the status, still not flip. So this is one kind of movement marketing. Yeah, it is, sometimes it works for you, sometimes it don't. So.
Great. And now, if we're looking at the future and the innovations, what do you think will be the trends? Which trends will die out? Which trends will continue? And what's the value of them in the storytelling?
I think, my fellow panelists have kept mentioning, right, that with AI, and even you mentioned that, right, with AI and with data and everything becoming so automated and, and the likes of that, I think storytelling is going to be so much more important moving forward. That's a trend that's not going to die. And I think what we'll need to do is, right, we'll have to combine all of that. We'll have to combine data. We've got to use AI in being able to craft compelling narratives for brands to move forward, right? And that's the only way, because we as human beings today crave for connection. We as human beings today crave for things that are far much more real. We want to go back to our roots. We want to go back to what made our lives far much more simpler, right? And the only way we're able to do it, right, is through effective storytelling. Stories make the world go round, right? There was a very big critic, right, on Yuval Noah Harris's book, and he said that, there's nothing original in that book. And he himself said, you're right, there's nothing original in that book that I wrote. It's just that I wrote in a different manner, and that's why it's sold millions and millions of copies. So I think it's really taking a the same message, and really putting it into a new way that's actually going to work, right? And if you see some of the biggest examples of that, it's just really that. So storytelling is going to be very, very relevant, and how we're going to use it with the changing times, with all these new technologies coming in, is going to be interesting.
As what is going with AI, and everyone is going to create a content, okay? That content nothing if you don't put the story. As a million of people are going with a chat GPT or other stuff, and they are going content each day. Million of people create a content and put on social media, and the people are consuming. But what content really work? If you put human factor, as last day, people are talking here, and they said that there's the main thing that if you use ChatGPT, if you use AI as a human, if you would able to do that, then it always work. And when you talk about as a human, it should be storytelling way, so people can relate that thing.
I'm going to make a statement and say that nothing really is original anymore. It's a bit of a blanket statement, but it really comes down to then, I mean, if you think about, when you talk about stories and storytelling, like the stories we've heard within our families or our cultures, or what we see online, I don't think it's the same as when that incident or whatever first happened. When people communicate, they like to add their own personalization, they add their own view, they add a bit of the spice, the drama, anything to catch people's attention. And that's what when we see in terms of content that people create. Like it's so different when a brand talks versus when people talk. And I think in terms of trends and what brands should actually start doing more is letting people tell their own stories, because it gives them more opportunity to add their own flavors, they add their own personalization. And people like seeing that because it's so much more easier to connect with. Like, it's all about user-generated content. It's not new, but it's about letting go of that control, because brands are very nervous sometimes of doing that, because you don't know what will people say. And it may not always be the most positive thing, but at the same time, it's a lot more authentic. One of the best campaigns, which I love, is the Apple shot on iPhone. I mean, if you think about it, they don't really have to do much. They have people who are saying, here, use my content, use my stories, use it in your advertising. They don't even have to spend anything on content creation. And this campaign has been going on for, I would say, 10 years now. And every time it's new and original, because it's people telling their own stories through their own lens, literally. So it's all about like giving control back, and especially with tools such as AI, etc. It's becoming a lot more easier for people to interpret and show how they're actually passionate about a brand or product in their own way. And that's not going to change. So it's better I say, work with it than try to actually stop or control it.
Thank you. I also believe that when it comes to generative AI and all of those buzzwords, it's rather add-on and a help, and the right use of it is as a co-pilot rather than its own force. And once brands come back to their roots as human, come back to their people type of approach, we will see more of storytelling being more empathetic, more connected. And my last concluding question would be, so how do we see the brands building the storytelling in a way that's more empathetic, that's more connected, and more humanized?
I think it really goes down back to, just studying your consumer. I think as brands move forward, we're dealing with so many different generations, right? Obviously, they were first trying to sell to Gen X and then millennials, and now we're going to be dealing with Gen Z, and then there's Gen Alpha, right? So I think it really is to be able to really study, each of these audiences, what motivates them, and what really motivates them. And once we're able to really study, this entire set of generations, right? I think that's when you'll be able to figure out, how to sort of talk to them. And I think it just boils down to that, really knowing who your customer is, right? I think a lot of people just forget that. We start making things, we start building our but not really talking to our consumer, not doing enough of research to be able to say, hey, who is the person who I'm going to be selling to? So yeah, that's essentially what it's going to be.
Here come to research and data. When we see that there are multiple kind of people and different perspective for everyone. So when we have planned to create an impact on the audience, and we have to deal with different generations. So research is the first part. Once we understand the audience, then the second point that how we can relate with them. How can we create an emotions content so they can feel that we are doing something for them. Brand is not just to sell the product. It's all about to add the value in their own life. So once we are putting some value using brand and putting the stories, so customer is not going anywhere. Everyone want a good quality services, but sometimes it happens you haven't any idea that brand is provide this kind of services. Once you know that this brand is once brand is educate to you, put the awareness, he's doing that thing, and he's also a same way as you are thinking, like a human thing. So customer always link with you and go for a long run. This is what I feel.
There's a lot of talk about like how AI and all can take over people's jobs and, can create things and come up with its own stories and all, which it does, but it's not original, it's not new. AI can only recycle what is already out there. And the point of that is that as humans, we always need to be creating something original. There is that remix, using whatever exists and coming up with your own version of it. And I think people are seeing that, people are realizing that human element is just so important that now we're seeing, I think it's almost like a reverse trend of having consultants back in on the creative side, adding consumer behavior, consumer psychology, and we're seeing a lot more of that human element being added into the mix in saying how can we actually understand our audiences better and how can we talk to them better. So as much in terms of, yes, technology is going definitely, but it's only, I would say, a baseline to start from than the end all, and that's something that we have to keep in mind.
Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed the chat. So please, if you did too, give a round of applause to our amazing panelists.
So can we have quick questions with our panelists? Anyone?
Hi all, thank you so much for the insightful discussion. So I just wanted to ask with regards to storytelling, and there is a saying that, especially where I come from, publicity, good or bad, is still publicity, right? Then when it comes to just creating content that you know is controversial or that could trend or that would blow up or be viral, what would you advise as like you draw the line here? Because sometimes I feel like there isn't any line or any boundaries, and for a company or brand or individual, you should at least have some sort of like boundaries. So yeah, that's the question.
Okay, I'm going to answer this very. So this is one company, okay, called GetVantage, okay. They are into debt-based financing, revenue-based financing. They opened up with their tagline saying, "Get funded, not FUCKED." They put it out there, right? Literally, right? And obviously they put a star. So literally that's what they said, And I was like, damn, that's crazy, that's bold. And he was like, yeah, that's what we needed to do to create attention, and obviously we had to let go of it. But that was fantastic, right? So to answer your question, you sometimes need to know when to draw the line, but also at what stage, of the brand is, how mature is it? If it's starting off and you want to, create that attention and create that noise, just go for it, And then maybe once, the brand matures, that's when you probably take a step back and say, hey, you know what, we want to stay away from that stuff. So yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, so in short, we shouldn't be afraid. We should just
don't be afraid.
Be bold.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Very quickly.
Thank you guys for the lovely talk. Really, like you opened a lot of like areas of thoughts. One issue that we usually face when we do optimization is related to if I have a big media budget. There's usually a strategy at the media agency, and like everybody's following, we have enough to do a lot of things. The issue you face when you have a portfolio of brands, you usually have a tail of 3-4 brands with very limited budget, okay? Usually supporting seasonality, a small launch or something like this. How can we do storytelling, or is it needed in this case? So I like your example about like get funded, but you wouldn't be doing this if you have a lot of established brands, because you're gonna put your brand, the big brand, the mother brand will be in danger. So how could storytelling be an amplifier for such a small budget? I face that problem all the time, because in this case, I just optimize the media. I can't do any more than this. So do you have some, I'm looking for advice, if you know what I mean.
Okay, it's a problem these days. As a limited budget, once you go for storytelling, most of the time we have to come up with the influencer marketing. We can come up with two things in my mind right now as you put the question. That is, one is that we can come up with the influencer marketing. We can hire some influencer to do our marketing. As Zomato is doing that, he just, Sammy, maybe some of you know, Indian people know that he used to joke, he's a funny guy, and he's doing branding for Zomato. So he used to create podcasting, and he used to go out for day blogging, vlogging. And this is one of the way to doing with small budget. On the other hand, this is the other thing is that customer story way. Like we can put our customer story to the audience. This is also one of the way where we can put a small budget, but we can get more attention as people. Once we come up to the customer story, customer used to share with everyone. Like if he has a good audience, he can share with them. So indirectly, we are going to get attention from other people. This is what I feel.
You want to add to that? Should I add? Okay. So I think, yeah, it's a typical problem. I face it all the time. We face it all the time, right? And I think over here, there are innovative ways of being able to, sort of create great stories and with limited budgets. You just got to rack your brain, unfortunately, right? And we've done that, right? Sometimes just put, somebody in front of a camera, green screen it, right? And, that's when the script really speaks volumes in terms of how you want to sort of communicate that message. So I think, and like, my fellow panelists mentioned, right? Do you want to use a bit of influencers? And then obviously with respect to influencers, there's always that balance. Should you use more of media because that's going to get you, your results in terms of, ROI, or should you create, content, or if you have previous content, should I just sort of, take that and sort of put that forward? So it's always going to be different, decisions, where you, not different decisions, but you're going to have different scenarios. You're going to figure out what you want to do. But again, it depends on where the brand is, where you are, what's the relationship between you and the brand, and what you could take forward at that point in time. Yeah.
Felita, do you want to add? Yeah, I just want to add a couple of comments from my end. Even when it comes to influencer marketing, there is ways to do influencer marketing. You can go to a mega influencer with millions of following, and obviously you're gonna get the reach, but it's become very expensive. But what I really like is the recent trend of micro-influencing, because people trust people who don't have a huge following, because it feels more authentic. It feels like a person actually speaking out of their own experience rather than just being paid off by the brand. And the smaller influencers, the micro influencers, less than 10,000 following, they're more eager to put their best foot forward, to present your brand in the best limelight, because for them it's just the beginning of the journey, so they're gonna put a lot of work to it when it comes to influencer marketing. And when it comes to the digital marketing, it comes back to being authentic and really kind of optimize different communication approach for different audiences. So stay true to the brands, but speak differently depending who you speaking to. And even a small budget, if done right, could make a big impact.
All right, so can we have a big round of applause for the wonderful speakers and a wonderful topic? And very quickly, like one word for what can be the powerful element for the digital marketing story? So, to you, one word or one line from each one of you.
Authenticity.
Okay.
Yeah, being original.
Same word, authenticity. It's really work.
Everyone's taking the good ones. I would say another A, audiences.
All right. Okay, can we have a big round of applause as we conclude the session successfully? So can we have a group photograph, and if you come forward for, yeah.
I would ask Madali to present certificate of participation to our wonderful panelists. So first we have Hafiz Muhammad Waqas. Come on guys, huge round of applause for Hafiz. So next we have Felita Figueredo. Come on guys, huge round of applause for Felita. So next we have Tufail Merchant. Come on guys, huge round of applause for Tufail. Last we have wonderful moderator of the session, Malika Kennedy. Come on guys, huge round of applause for Malika.